Good morning from Canada next. Canadian visits to the United States are plunging as a quiet boycott grows.
Canadians are shifting travel and shopping to new partners, turning silent choices into lasting change.
Breaking tonight from Ottawa. The boycott everyone said would fail just passed its 10th month. And the numbers coming out of Statistics Canada tell a story Washington didn't see coming. Canadian travel to the United States collapsed by 24% in air traffic alone last month. Border crossings by car down more than 30%. This wasn't supposed to happen. After 2 years of post-pandemic recovery, the curve was climbing back toward normal. Then something broke. Not loudly. Not with protests or petitions. Canadians simply looked at Trump's America and said, "No thanks," and kept walking. And here's what makes this feel different from many past boycotts. So far, there's little sign Canadians are coming back in large numbers. Late 2024 and early 2025. That's when the shift began in earnest. Trump threatened another round of tariffs and started talking openly about Canada as a fit first state, even floating annexation in major interviews, and Canadians, polite, patient Canadians, made a decision. Not in Parliament, not at rallies, in their wallets, in their booking apps, in the quiet calculation of where they'd spend their next vacation dollar. And Washington is only now realizing what happened. You want to know why this boycott has teeth? Because it's not angry. It's indifferent. And indifference, my friends, is so much more permanent than rage. Let me show you the data because this is where it gets fascinating. Canadians aren't traveling less. They're just not going to America anymore. The booking patterns tell the story. Mexico and the Caribbean are seeing massive upticks. Europe's getting a second look from people who haven't crossed the Atlantic in years. And domestic tourism inside Canada? Record levels. Some people canceled their trips entirely, sure, but most just found somewhere else to go. Somewhere that wasn't the United States. This is not symbolic protest. This is money moving. Real money. Billions in lost revenue for American hotels, restaurants, theme parks. All the small border economies built on reliable Canadian dollars. And the trend isn't softening, it's hardening into habit. But wait, because it gets better. Or worse, if you're watching from Washington, the boycott isn't just about plane tickets, it's about grocery carts. Walk into any Canadian supermarket right now and you'll see something remarkable. Made in Canada labels everywhere. Year over year, sales of Canadian-made food products are up more than 10%. American-made foods, down nearly 9%. Household goods, daily staples, products Canadians bought without thinking for decades, suddenly they're checking labels. Suddenly they're choosing local. Now, most boycotts die in their first 60 days. The outrage fades, convenience wins. People go back to their routines. But something different is happening here. These aren't temporary choices. These are new habits forming, new loyalties building. And habits, once they set in your brain, are incredibly difficult to break. You want to understand why? Let me take you inside the Canadian mindset right now. This isn't about punishing America. It's about something more fundamental, self-respect. There's a particular kind of dignity in how this is playing out. No marches, no angry social media campaigns, just millions of individual decisions adding up to a national statement. You thought we'd just show up anyway. You were wrong. The psychology here is textbook behavioral economics. When trust breaks between neighbors, people don't always fight back. Sometimes they just quietly take their business elsewhere. And that's exactly what's unfolding along the world's longest undefended border. I want to show you something that Washington really doesn't want to talk about. While Canadians are pulling away from the United States, Americans themselves are moving north in record numbers. I covered this phenomenon in a previous video, but the symmetry is striking. One country stepping back, the other trying to get in. The border has stopped being just a line on a map. It's become a mirror reflecting two very different reactions to the same political reality. Now, here's where this gets geopolitical afterwards. Because as tensions with the United States rise, Canadians are starting to look elsewhere. Not just for vacations, but for trade, for partnership, for the kind of economic ties that used to be automatic with America. More than half of Canadians now say Canada should focus more on building economic relationships with China. That number is up 15% in just 2 years. And perhaps most remarkable, 46% of Canadians now view the United States as a threat compared to only 34% for China. Let that sink in for a moment. Amerido Isa, Canada's neighbor ally, largest trading partner for a century, is now seen by nearly half of Canadians as more threatening than Beijing. The good neighbor status that Washington took for granted, it's on ice, literally and figuratively. Does this mean Canada is about to become best friends with China? No. Only about a quarter of Canadians think China should be treated as a true ally. But the signal is unmistakable. Canada, one of America's most reliable partners, is actively hedging its bets. And Prime Minister Mark Carney is traveling the world right now, making this official policy. He's in the Gulf states, in Europe, across Asia, seeking out new partnerships, diversifying exports, building relationships that don't run through Washington. The most striking commentary sometimes comes from unexpected voices. Doug Ford, Ontario's premier and a conservative politician, described Trump as acting like an enemy. Think about that. This isn't a left-wing activist or a university professor. This is a conservative provincial leader using language you'd expect in wartime. And he's not alone. From Vancouver to Halifax, Canadian politicians across the spectrum are reading the same public mood. Enough. Meanwhile, Washington's response has been to double down. More tariffs, more threats, more bluster about annexation. It's almost comedic if it weren't so consequential. Every time Trump or his administration escalates the rhetoric, another 1,000 Canadians cancel their Florida vacation and book Costa Rica instead. Every trade threat pushes Canadian businesses to find new suppliers in Europe or Asia, and it's like watching someone pour gasoline on a bridge they're standing on. But here's what bothers me personally, and this is important. There's a human cost to all of this that the data can't capture. Families split by the border. Snowbirds who've spent winters in the same Arizona town for 20 years suddenly looking at properties in Portugal. Small businesses on both sides losing customers they've served for generations. These shifts aren't just lines on a graph. They're lived experiences. Real people making painful choices because trust eroded. Too far. Too fast. I think about the elderly Canadian couple who used to drive to Florida every winter. The same route, the same stops, the same friends waiting for them. This year they went to Spain. They told their daughter it just didn't feel right anymore. That's not politics talking. That's something deeper, a sense that the welcome is gone, that the relationship changed in ways that can't be fixed with an election or a policy shift. And here's the thing Washington needs to understand. You can't shame people back into spending money in your country. You can't bully them into tourism. Once that trust is gone, once people find alternatives they actually prefer, the old patterns don't automatically return. Human behavior doesn't work that way. Polling data shows Canadian concerns about Trump's America are actually rising, not falling, as time goes on. Recent surveys place worries about the United States climbing to the top tier of Canadian concerns, alongside things like cost of living and housing. This matters because it suggests the boycott isn't losing steam. It's gaining conviction. Every month that passes without a reset in the relationship is another month of habit formation, another month of Canadians discovering they actually like vacationing in Mexico, another month of businesses building supply chains that bypass American distributors. The world doesn't always change through dramatic events. Sometimes it changes through accumulation. Millions of small decisions that add up. That's what's happening right now between Canada and the United States. Not a rupture, a drift. And drifts, once they start, are notoriously difficult to reverse. So let me ask you directly, because I'm genuinely curious how deep this goes. If you're a Canadian, what's changed for you in the last year? Your travel plans, obviously. But what about the grocery store? Are you checking labels now when you used to just grab whatever was closest? Did you switch from American brands to Canadian ones without really thinking about it? And if something did change, when did it happen? Because sometimes the biggest shifts don't announce themselves. They just arrive one day as a quiet enough. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your stories. Have you felt this shift personally? Do you know someone who canceled their annual trip to the States? How permanent do you think this is? The most powerful form of protest isn't always the loudest. Sometimes it's the quietest. The simple decision to walk away. To take your time, your money, your loyalty, and redirect it elsewhere. To say without saying, I'm done. And when an entire country makes that decision simultaneously, when the 38 million people quietly change their habits over 10 months, that's not a boycott anymore. That's a realignment. That's history moving. Washington can pretend this isn't happening. They can dismiss it as temporary emotion. They can wait for it to blow over like boycotts usually do. But 10 months in, the data says otherwise. Canadians aren't coming back. They're building new patterns, new loyalties, new relationships that don't require them to overlook being called the 51st state or having their sovereignty questioned like a negotiable asset. And here's the final irony. This wasn't inevitable. A different approach from Washington, one based on respect rather than transactional threats, and none of this happens. The billions in lost tourism revenue, the strategic pivot toward Asia, the quiet dissolution of automatic partnership. All avoidable. But you can't threaten and belittle a neighbor for years and expect them to keep showing up with smiles and spending money. Eventually, they just stop showing up. So to every Canadian watching this, you're part of something historically significant, even if it feels mundane. Your decision to vacation in Portugal instead of Florida, to buy Canadian cheese instead of American, to quietly redirect your life away from a neighbor who stopped acting neighborly, that's power. Not the loud kind, the durable kind, the kind that reshapes relationships without requiring anyone's permission. And to everyone else watching this unfold, pay attention. Because what's happening between Canada and the United States right now is a masterclass in how countries adapt when trust snaps. Not with wars or sanctions, but with shopping carts and plane tickets, with the accumulated weight of millions saying no thanks and meaning it. The border is still there. The geography hasn't changed, but the relationship, that's being rewritten in real time, one canceled trip at a time. And 10 months in, with the numbers hardening instead of softening, it's time to acknowledge what this really is. Not a protest. A divorce. Quiet, dignified, and apparently permanent. What we're witnessing isn't just about one boycott or one presidency. It's about what happens when special relationships get treated like transactions. When that happens, things get optional. Then they become background noise. And protest, the most powerful kind, isn't the one making all the noise, it's the one you barely hear. The quiet choice to just walk away. The simple decision to walk away. Thanks for watching Canada Next. If these stories matter to you, subscribe to stay ahead of what's really happening in Canadian geopolitics. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next analysis. And check out my previous video on Americans moving to Canada. It's the other side of this same coin that nobody's talking about. Drop your thoughts below. Have you felt this shift personally? What was your enough moment? The conversation continues in the comments. This is Canada Next, where we cover the stories that shape Canada's future. See you in the next one.